Have you ever tried to control anxiety with just your thoughts? Or have you realized that maybe your anxiety has something to do with what's happening in your body physically? Today, we're going to explore two stories that really go into just that, how anxiety could be part of what's being held in your body for a host of different reasons. Welcome to Healing Beyond the Symptoms, the podcast that helps people discover the root causes of their health struggles and take back control with science, strategy, and self-awareness. I'm Dr. Leah Hahn, a chiropractor and functional wellness doctor who believes that true healing starts beneath the surface. So let's dive in. So today we're going to highlight two different client stories. One that we're going to talk about is Lucy, another is Ellie. And when we talk about these stories, there's so many people in our area and throughout the United States, throughout the world, that have dealt with long-term Lyme or mold exposure that's creating a situation called dysautonomia within their nervous system. So I want to explore that with you, what that looks like, because you may not be as familiar with what could be happening on a chemical level or an inflammatory level within the body. But it really, these stories really highlight how anxiety and emotional symptoms might not just be happening in your head. They could really be happening within the body. And when we can connect to the body and really start to go into that mind-body healing, it can make a huge difference in terms of someone's level of well-being and getting their quality of life back. So let's talk about those stories.
Lucy, she came into us because she just moved into the area. She was looking for a gentle chiropractic because her body was dealing with chronic inflammation. She wasn't able to really tolerate the traditional high velocity, low amplitude thrust, which is more the popping and cracking style chiropractic that most people associate with chiropractic. So she was looking for something gentler because her body couldn't tolerate that. But she knew she needed help. When she was younger, she got, Lyme disease, or got infected with the Borrelia infection, and she went through the hospitalization, the antibiotics, but since then she always dealt with kind of chronic inflammation. As she got a little bit older, then she had some massive mold exposures with some of the places that she was living and working, which then also added this additional major inflammation cycle in her body. And what we noticed, or what she came in with, was one of her major symptoms was just really intense anxiety, along with just, looking for, the different body aches and pains within kind of the neck pain, low back stuff, hip stuff.
And I remember you talking a lot about this, is that she had really lost trust in her body. So she was someone who really loved to do really intense outdoor activities, but didn't trust that her body to be able to show up and perform in a way that she felt safe doing those things, or was so worried that she would be triggered in a situation like that as well.
Yeah, so the inflammation patterns would trigger her, and then she wouldn't be able to use, her body to just wouldn't function right. So she wouldn't be able to go on the bike rides, go on the rafting trips, go on the different things that she liked to do. Um, so what we noticed is with her was, the anxiety was really locked into her body. And so she would frequently miss work, or she'd call us up to, say, hey, can I get in? Because her anxiety is really bad. And so what was driving the anxiety in her scenario was this dysautonomia, where there's this dysregulation in the autonomic nervous system, which is basically, the autonomic nervous system is what controls kind of all the internal organ functions. So kind of like your stomach to digest food, your liver to kind of, detoxify, the pancreas to release, digestive enzymes, the intestines kind of do what they're doing, the kidneys to detox, and just all the internal processes. That's what the autonomic nervous system controls. So dysautonomia means that there's dysregulation in that. And so for her, what we saw is because of, I should say, not just her, but one of the things that we see in our patients who have kind of chronic Lyme, or they have chronic mold exposure, is their bodies will frequently be stuck in the fight or flight response. We always associate fight or flight just purely from the stress response. But when we get exposed to different chemicals repeatedly, the body goes into defense physiology with that too, because
Or the immune system too. Yeah, it's being triggered.
It goes into protection mode. And so as the body goes into protection mode, what that does then is it puts us into the fight or flight response. And then therefore it's like the chemical trigger can put us into the fight or flight response just as much as the mountain lion or some other sort of stressful event can throw us into the fight or flight response. So that's, I think, one of the big things that's kind of missing when people talk about that fight or flight response is knowing that it's not always just purely a stress response. It can be a chemical trigger
Hmm.
on top of maybe an emotional trigger that can drive that. And so in her case, what was driving that was this chronic inflammation in her detox pathways because they got hit really hard when she was young with the real intense antibiotics that she was on, and then the mold exposure. All of that had really kind of clogged up and bogged down her detox pathways, which then was leading into this major inflammation cycle that she was in. And what drive that then for her would be basically this raging anxiety that she would express, where she couldn't calm down. And she originally kind of, it's just, we don't understand where we perceive it. But then eventually she realized, she's like, I perceived it in my body versus necessarily in my brain. And then as we were starting to work with her and allowing her body to start to clear the kind of the inflammation, I shouldn't say clear the inflammation, but allow her body to get out of that fight or flight response,
Hmm.
then what that did then was allow her body to better detox, better get rid of the toxicity, which then helped the inflammation come down, which then helped that anxiety come down. So she would almost always notice when she would come in for a visit, if her anxiety was high when she started, it would almost be, mostly gone or completely gone.
Hmm.
And that was something that was really big because originally when she first came into us, she had anxiety all the time. And then after she was with us for a little bit, then she started to know she had anxiety some of the time. And then she started to realize she's like calm most of the time with very few, anxiety moments. And then from that moment, she was able to continue to gain better trust in her body, and she was able to gain greater confidence. And as the kind of as the nervous system and started to improve, that dysautonomia started to improve and started getting to better regulation. Then she started to learn to trust her body again. And then she was able to kind of go on the rafting trips, go on the biking trips, do the things that she wanted to do without the worry that her body was going to give out on her.
Hmm. And that's a, I mean, really common pattern that you see of how her story unfolded is that you see as the nervous system starts to connect to what tension is there and start to release that tension, their body, they start to, notice that the symptoms start to improve. But healing rarely goes in this like perfect trajectory that we think it should. It's typically this up and down kind of experience. So as her body became more adaptable, like you said, her baseline state shifted. And so she was no longer in this chronic state of anxiety. It was periods of time. And then she got to a point where that really wasn't her state anymore because her body had become that much more adaptable. So that is very common in the healing process, but you really saw her start to take back her life in terms of how she was able to navigate things, show up for things that she really wanted to be a part of, enjoy, participate in life in a totally new way, which was really exciting because sometimes when people are dealing with these chronic conditions, they feel like there's no hope, that they're always going to be anxious, they're always going to be inflamed. And really, when the body can go into healing mode, and especially the mind body healing mode, there's such a different way of being and a different way of living that can happen. And we're going to take a quick break. This episode of Healing Beyond the Symptoms is sponsored by Body and Balance Wellness Center in Golden, Colorado. They know that real healing isn't about chasing symptoms, it's about uncovering the root cause of stress, tension, and imbalance. Their gentle nervous system-based care helps people release stored stress, reconnect to their bodies, and build resilience that lasts. If you've tried everything and still feel like something's missing, they may be the missing link. Learn more and book your consultation at bodyandbalancechiropractic.com. All right, and let's get back to the show. So, such a great story with how Lucy's life really shifted with network care. If we look at Ellie's story, the reason we chose to continue talking about Ellie's situation is that it was very common. There's some commonalities there. There's more and more people that are dealing with mold and long-term Lyme, chronic Lyme. And so in Ellie's situation, it was expressed a little bit differently, but there was still this feeling that she was dealing with a lot of emotional dysregulation that was caused by the nervous system not functioning like she wanted it to. So tell us more about her situation and her story.
So what I remember with Ellie is she actually originally came into our office from a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
and she was dealing kind of with this inflammation cycle with that from the whiplash in her neck. And so what ended up happening is after she wasn't healing, then we discovered like the chronic mold exposure that she was dealing with. And that in the apartment that she was living in. And what that was doing was just putting her body into this massive inflammation state, which wasn't allowing her body to get into that healing cycle. And unfortunately, a little while into that too, then she was also diagnosed with chronic Lyme as well too. And so there was, in her scenario, it was just one of these things where each little piece just kind of built on the next, built on the next, built on the next, which then finally her body just couldn't tolerate anymore. And so she was just getting sicker and sicker and sicker, even though on the surface it looked like there was originally just this car accident component. There was all these other pieces that were sitting behind the scenes that were preventing her from healing. And so as we're able to kind of dig into those and start to recognize some of those, that's where we were able to help her body to be able to start to shift that cycle. Because what happened is the car accident put her body into a major fight or flight cycle,
Hmm.
because that was kind of an instant trauma, instant reaction, high stress response. But then because there was this kind of like underlying layer of inflammation that
Right.
was being suppressed because it just had never gone through that high stress cycle, the instant the system went through that high stress cycle, then the chronic inflammation that was subtly seen there behind the scenes, then that got expressed. And that's where kind of the illness started to kick in for her and basically get worse. So what we were able to do is with hers help her nervous system to get out of that kind of the fight or flight response. One of the things that we're starting to see more and more, the research is starting to show more and more in some of these really chronic diseases or issues, like especially Lyme or mold, what they're finding out is it's nervous system dysregulation. That's the number, that's their new approach of what they're trying to do. And they're seeing huger changes with it, which doesn't surprise me because we've been seeing that for years in that group, is because it is this body gets stuck into the fight or flight response from whatever trauma, whatever it's, whether it's a chemical trauma through, basically being poisoned by mold or basically, whatever infection might be in the system. It sets up in this kind of chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And so when you see these inflammation and responses, then then you see it start to manifest in different ways. And so Ellie was dealing with a lot of brain fog. She was dealing with tremendous amounts of fatigue to the point where she could barely work anymore. There's
Hmm.
days, sometimes almost weeks, where she wasn't able to work. And what we were able to do then is get her system to start to shift out of that fight or flight response and then getting into kind of the healing cycle. And also too, we got her referred into like kind of a Lyme specialist as well too, to make sure that that side was handled, because that's another important piece. And then help her get the mold remediated as well too, or to find an expert to kind of help her with that. So there's are other pieces that needed to happen, but there's still the healing that needs to happen on the inside. So just because maybe the infection's gone, or maybe just because the exposure to that chemical is gone, the body's still responding like it's there because it got trapped into that cycle. It got trapped into that fear response. And she was another one that lost trust within her body because it felt like everything that she did would send it into a flare, or would trigger it to be worse. And what she noticed is that when she would come in and get worked on and get the network spinal care, is that she would feel better, she could think clearer, she could work for longer, as she was able to start to process all these things. And then slowly over time, she was really able to gain her health back, her life back, and really be able to, function 100% independently again, where a lot of times with some of the chronic Lyme and chronic mold, these people's lives are just absolutely destroyed because of the intensity of what they go through and the significance and how hard it takes them out.
Well, and you're seeing that in a lot of the research is that they're showing that, they can add in all of the supplements for some of these clients, and they can, really try to do all of these different detoxification therapies, and they're all helpful. But if the nervous system is stuck in fight or flight, it's just not. There's something that will always be in the way from that person moving into healing mode. So it's really important, like in these situations, like you talked about for Ellie, that she got, specific specialists to help with the mold issue and the Lyme issue, those types of things. But without the nervous system based care, her body still could not navigate the healing process. So when she was able to get that, it was life changing, really. Like, in her new baseline state is so much healthier.
She always tells me that she says if it wasn't for us, she doesn't think she'd be alive, because it was the aspect of allowing her body to function better. Because commonly what we'll see is in a lot of these mold Lyme scenarios, like some of the treatments can be pretty intense. And so if the care allows their bodies to function better, to detox better, and then it allows that treatment to function, but like it allows
To actually work.
it allows the
Yeah.
body to tolerate the treatment. A lot of times the body can't tolerate the treatment because they're just too sick. So if you can improve that baseline so they can tolerate the treatment, then they can start to get to this new level of health because they're able to get through the different protocols. They're able to get through the different recommendations. And when they can get through that, then they can actually get to that deeper level of healing so they can function and thrive once again in life. Where otherwise it's commonly where the body's just stuck in these patterns, stuck in the fight or flight response, and they're not able to tolerate the treatments to move forward. They can't get through that, so they can never get to the other side.
Well, and what goes so much with that as well is that emotional health and well-being. Because again, with the inflammatory cycles, I mean, people may just feel like they're so just dysregulated, like they are crying all the time, or they just feel really depressed, or they feel really anxious. And that can be situational, but it also can be because of what's happening internally within the nervous system. And so we want to get that piece of it back on board as well, so that sense of well-being can start to come back.
I listened to one doctor speak one time about how, and we know the brain doesn't perceive pain, even though you can get headaches and migraines and stuff like that. But what he was stressing is when you see these like anxiety type responses, when you see like high emotional states, raging depression, stuff like that, those are equivalent of like pain type responses in the brain.
In the
It's
brain.
not that they're actually pain, it's just that it's the brain is screaming warning signals, say something is wrong, something's not right here. Brain fog can show up that way too. So when you see these major emotional dysregulated states, a lot of times it has this underlying kind of chemical dysregulated state from toxicity or from different pieces there. So
Right.
if you can get the system to function better, get it out of that dysautonomic dysregulation in that sense of the dysautonomia, and get it into like proper regulation, and the body can properly detox, that's one of the reasons why you see the inflammation come down and why you see the
It's such a healing response.
yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I hope these stories highlighted for you how important the nervous system is in terms of the healing response and what that piece of healing can be. If you're dealing with anxiety, depression, brain fog, inflammatory cycles, the nervous system could be your missing link. We hope today's episode was helpful in terms of finding different solutions that could help you move into a new state of well-being and healing. Thanks for spending time with us today. We hope you feel more connected, not only to what we do, but to why we do it. If you'd like to take the next step on your healing journey, you can book a consultation at Body and Balance Wellness Center. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram at Body and Balance Wellness Center. Until next time, remember, healing is a process. There are many solutions. We're here to walk with you every step of the way. Thanks again for joining me today on Healing Beyond the Symptoms. If you've been curious about Network Spinal, or if you've tried everything else and still feel stuck, I want you to know this. Your body is not broken. It's patterned, and those patterns can change. If you're ready to experience how gentle care can lead to profound transformation, I'd love to invite you to book a wellness consultation at bodyandbalancechiropractic.com. Together, we'll look at what your body needs to finally release, reset, and thrive. Until next time, breathe deep, trust your body, and remember, gentle can be powerful.